The relationship between philosophy and reason holds significant details, especially when we consider how philosophy is practiced through reason and how reason itself becomes a subject of philosophical inquiry. When we talk about reason, we also discuss the method by which philosophy is carried out and the organ of the body through which it operates. This is because reason is a function of the soul, and the soul is dealt with within the scope of natural philosophy. In this context, once the essence of the soul and its sensory faculties are determined, the inner senses belonging to the soul must also be identified. Research on reason examines faculties such as perception, which are common among living beings, as well as the thinking soul, which is unique to humans. As a result, the process of finding the middle term in logical investigations comes into play in human reason. The mind, which obtains forms through abstraction and discovers the middle term, carries out this process under the influence of the active intellect. On the other hand, the issue of cosmic reason, which Plato places at the center, and the act of reasoning shape other dimensions of the problem. Therefore, the human mind needs to be examined by considering all these elements together. The Greek term nous carries profound meanings in classical philosophical terminology and refers to the fundamental functions of the human mind, such as reason and intellect. This concept implies not only individual thinking ability, but also a universal mind. In terms of efforts to explore the metaphysical dimension of soul research, the concept of nous is a very rich and suitable area for in-depth examination. This is due to the versatility and comprehensiveness of the concept. For example, Anaxagoras, one of the pre-Socratic philosophers, used the concept of nous to explain the first cause of the universe. This approach was considered a groundbreaking innovation in the intellectual world of that time. According to Anaxagoras, the order and motion in the universe cannot be explained solely by mechanical causes. Behind it lies nous as a conscious and regulating force. This idea also played an important role in the investigation of arche, which is one of the first and perhaps most fundamental problems of philosophy, meaning the main substance or principle of the universe. Anaxagoras' nous not only explained the physical world, but also initiated fundamental discussions about the place of thought and consciousness in the universe. Plants, animals, and humans share basic sensory powers, such as nourishment. However, beyond these basic powers, there are also some inner sensory faculties shared between animals and humans. These faculties go beyond simple sensory perceptions and are considered in conjunction with deeper investigations into the mind. Inner senses shape the way an individual perceives their environment and processes the information they obtain from these perceptions. This process is directly related to the functioning of the mind and plays a critical role in the individual's understanding of the world. In philosophy, the functions of the mind and how these functions develop are addressed within a hierarchical structure. According to this structure, there is a series of sensory and cognitive processes that enable the mind to reach its most advanced functions. These processes, starting from the most basic level, follow a lineage that extends from the life force in plants to the sensory perceptions of animals, the conscious thinking ability of humans, and ultimately to the highest form of mind in the celestial spheres. This advanced stage of the mind in the realm of becoming and perishing is unique to human existence and is one of the most distinctive features that distinguish humans from other living beings. Finally, the concept of the active intellect is revisited, particularly in the context of emanation theory. Emanation theory is a theory that attempts to explain how beings are derived from the most supreme principle. In this context, the active intellect does not only represent the highest stage of the individual human mind, it is also seen as one of the fundamental principles of universal order and existence. The active intellect plays a central role in attempts to solve the ultimate problem of emanation theory and therefore comes to the fore again in philosophical debates. This brings with it a deep inquiry into both the nature of the mind and its place in the universe. Plato summarizes Anaxagoras' thought on reason as mind being the arranger of all things and the cause of everything. He discusses this idea in the Phaedo dialogue and states that he initially liked this idea, finding it logical and reasonable. According to Plato, the mind arranges everything. Therefore, to understand all processes of becoming and perishing, the only thing left is to figure out how this mind works and how it is effective. In this process, a person can only evaluate what they know best and worst based on their own mind. Because even though these two things are different, they both fall within the realm of knowledge. Plato, drawing on Anaxagoras' views, believes that he has found the cause of things and therefore considers Anaxagoras a philosopher suited to his own inclinations. However, this does not last long. Plato says that Anaxagoras eventually abandoned his own ideas. According to him, Anaxagoras never really used his mind fully and put forward material elements such as air and water as reasons to explain the order in the universe. Plato criticizes this approach of Anaxagoras and states that he did not deepen the concept of mind enough. Plato defended some of Anaxagoras' thoughts from certain angles. According to him, reason governs everything because no law can be found beyond human knowledge, and since reason is free, it cannot be dependent on anything. Plato, while mentioning two pieces of evidence proving the existence of God, also presents a conception of reason. The first is that everything in the continuous existence of the soul is unchanging and divine. The second is the continuous movement of the stars and celestial bodies governed by the mind that gives order to the universe. At this point, he states that the force that moves objects also belongs to one of the types of reason. According to Plato, reason and motion rotate in proportion to their order, and this cycle contains a balance. Plato's concept of reason is largely linked to cosmic reason. This cosmic reason is thought of as a kind of creative power in the world of becoming and perishing. In Plato's Metaphysics, cosmic reason is a principle that gives order to the universe and forms the basis of everything. On the other hand, the duties of the human mind are to know the ideas, forms, and to manage the other powers of the soul. In this context, reason can be considered as two types. The first is cosmic reason, which is infinite, and the second is human reason, which is finite. Cosmic reason has a directly divine quality and is seen as a power that regulates everything in the universe. In the universe, there are a certain number of finite elements along with the infinite. This cause, which regulates the years, seasons, and months, is called reason. We can also examine Plato's idea of cosmic reason through the Timaeus dialogue. Here, Plato says that the demiurge created the universe because it was good and free from ambition. Since the demiurge wants everything to resemble itself, it takes everything that is irregular and arranges it, assuming that this order will be good. The demiurge, by shaping the universe, gave it reason, and this reason became the most divine element within creation. Cosmic reason ensures harmony and rational mobility in the universe. This was bestowed by the gods for the purpose of preserving measure and grace for humans. Necessity combines with reason in the birth of the universe, and this situation leads to the universe being built upon wisdom from the beginning. According to Plato, Nous forms a divine aspect shared by the gods, where a few people find common ground. Two objects, where there is a distinction between concept and true opinion, are also considered with this understanding. These are the forms that we grasp not with our senses but with reason. However, the things we perceive with our senses are objects that resemble realities but are different from them. The concept is formed in us through teaching, while belief is formed without proof. The concept is something that can be carried by gods and very few people. Plato's cosmic reason does not occupy a central position in his metaphysics because its connection with the soul needs to be established directly. According to Plato, reason must be together with the soul. However, this is not a situation unique to the human mind. Although absolute being does not have a soul, reason and life coexist in it. However, this cosmic or human reason is placed below the forms. The soul has an intermediary status. Because it is immortal and immaterial, it has a structure that is both open to influence and influential. Reason is the soul's ability to comprehend by perceiving the forms. According to Plato, it is the idea of the good that gives reality to objects and gives the mind the power to know. This idea of the good is the source of known things and knowledge. No matter how valuable knowledge and truth are, the idea of the good is separate from them and in a much superior position. What the relationship between light and the eye is to the sun in the visible world, so is the relationship between knowledge and truth to the idea of the good in the intelligible world. But these are not the idea of the good itself. In conclusion, according to Plato, we can talk about different types of reason. These are divided into cosmic reason and human reason, and both types must be related to the soul. The knowledge of truth, which very few people can access, is attained through reason, which is the soul's ability to comprehend things. Cosmic reason has a structure that gives order to the universe and plays a critical role in Plato's conception of the universe. Aristotle's thought on reason, unlike the Platonic cosmic reason, focuses primarily on the mental activities that are a function of the human soul. With this shift in focus, metaphysical references continue in the same way, but in Aristotle, investigations into reason become directly linked to how knowledge is acquired. As we discussed in previous sections, the fact that each sense organ accepts the sensible without its matter includes imagination, which leads us to the thought of reason. At this point, we can look at Aristotle's concepts of reason and reasoning in more detail. Reasoning, as the act of the mind, brings forth the concept of nous. According to Aristotle, reasoning means the transition from potentiality to actuality in the process of knowing the thinkable form through the senses. This process establishes the relationship between the nature of knowledge and reason. Aristotle says, to summarize what we have said about the soul is in a way all existing things, because existing things are either sensibles or intelligibles. Knowledge, too, in a way, is knowable things and sensation is sensibles. According to Aristotle, the soul can interact with all existing things, because existing things are on the one hand intelligible, while on the other hand they can be sensed. There is no other being outside of these two types. The soul's knowledge is knowable things. Sensation comes from sensibles. Aristotle explains the soul's relationship with objects with the example of the hand. Accordingly, the soul is like the hand, which is the tool of tools. Reason is the form of intelligibles, and sensation is the form of sensibles. Intelligibles are both obtained through abstraction and sensed. Sensing at this point becomes the basic condition for learning and understanding. Imagination is no different from sensation, except that it is immaterial. However, according to Aristotle, imagination is separated from affirmation and denial, because truth or falsehood is the connection of concepts. At this point, the problem of how the first concepts will exist arises. This problem is overcome by saying that, even if there is no existence without imagination, the first form of concepts is not imagination. Aristotle, just as in his use of Plato's concept of nous, also touches upon the metaphysical dimensions of nous. This contact is directly related to his definition of the prime mover's act of actualization with noesis. Here, there is a departure from the thought of reason as a function of the human soul. Aristotle defines cosmic reason as a structure that is eternally self-contemplative. Every stage of the process of becoming and perishing depends on this activity of noesis. The fact that noesis constantly thinks about itself occupies an important place in the definition of the prime mover. Thought, which is essentially what it is, contemplates the best that is essentially, and the highest thought contemplates the highest good. Reason, when it grasps the intelligible, thinks itself. By coming into contact with its object and grasping it, it becomes intelligible. Ultimately, reason and the intelligible are one and the same. This passage has also been inspiring for the theory of emanation, which will be examined later. Aristotle's model of the prime mover provides important material in terms of the conception of reason. God's act of existing with himself is identified with the most perfect, eternal, and everlasting life. Therefore, since God is eternal and everlasting, life also belongs to God. This conception of Aristotle's on cosmic reason is separate from the act of human reason. God's thinking of himself consists of a thought about thinking, and this becomes a thinking about himself. This way of thinking, knowledge, episteme, Sensation, aesthesis, and opinion, doxa, contrast with other soul activities. Because the functioning of these ways of thinking is directed towards something else, however, they can later take themselves as their subject. This happens in an accidental way. Aristotle also expresses the difficulties of the thought of divine reason. When divine reason thinks of nothing, its value becomes debatable and it falls into a state of sleep. When it thinks, its thought is dependent on another principle. It is not the highest being. Ultimately, it actualizes itself by thinking of the most divine and most valuable thing. This leads to his thinking of himself. Aristotle's assessments, while revealing the differences between human reasoning and divine reasoning, are noteworthy. Since man is a compound being consisting of body and soul, his reasoning is discontinuous and challenging. Therefore, noesis requires a transition from potentiality to actuality. However, divine reasoning does not require a transition from potentiality to actuality or movement. Eternal and everlasting motion eliminates the transition from potentiality to actuality. Therefore, celestial bodies are always in a state of actuality. They never tire or perish in their orbits. These incorruptible beings are imitated by beings in constant change. While this explanation of Aristotle's evaluates the acts of reasoning of humans and God as noesis, it suggests that man can become divine through contemplation, theoria. This suggestion has also been decisive in Aristotle's moral philosophy and constitutes a critical stage in man's attainment of happiness. The process of contemplation is related to the connection of concepts and our making judgments to the extent that logic allows. Following these views put forward by Aristotle regarding the act of reasoning, we can move on to his thoughts on the functioning of reason, which are directly related to his theory of the soul. Aristotle, while working on the concept of reason, suggests that just like in the theory of matter and form, reason should also have parts with different qualities. In this context, the ideas of passive intellect and active intellect come to the fore. Indeed, on the one hand, there is reason in terms of its becoming everything. This reason, because it has functionality by its very being, is independent. It is completely free from all kinds of mixtures, attributes, or influences. Aristotle's two different concepts of reason are subject to a hierarchy within themselves. Active intellect, because it is actual, is original and should be considered independent of mixtures or passivity. Therefore, the active intellect occupies a superior position to the passive intellect. The active intellect, which is independent of influence, is distinguished from the passive intellect by this feature and surpasses it. The fact that we cannot remember the effects of the active intellect on us, that the passive intellect can be corrupted, stems from our inability to understand anything without the active intellect. Aristotle's views on this subject create a discussion about how the act of reasoning takes place between abstraction and the active intellect. Furthermore, the fact that the active intellect comes up more strongly in the theory of emanation further deepens the terminology. Ultimately, it is noteworthy that the point where Aristotle analyzes the problem is the active intellect.